I'm so excited to be studying the book of Daniel this week, and I'm going to repeat a little bit of what we did last week and then go into some illustrations and animations. I sent you the information on Shmini, which is the Torah portion this week in Leviticus. It was actually my bat mitzvah, my adult bat mitzvah Torah portion. So I sent you two batches. One is even more current and interesting from Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs about holy and unholy, or pure and impure, or when to do what. And it's a very good commentary. So you have a lot to read on Shabbat, but today we're going to dive into the middle of the book of Daniel. I'm going to ask Anita, please, to say a blessing for Torah study, and then we'll go in.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Holy One, a blessing, your presence fills creation. Thank you for giving us opportunities to connect with holiness, such as diving into and studying and busying ourselves with the words of Torah. We began the 6th chapter. I just want to remind us what happened there. There were jealous advisors to the king who didn't like that Daniel had no faults. So they made up something and they said, "O king, you should write that no one can bow down to any other God but you, our God." And Daniel was perturbed because he knew that he prays 3 times a day to Elohim, to what they would call then the Jewish God. And as we learned in the Esther scroll, once the king has written something, it cannot be abrogated. It can't be annulled. So here we have, when Daniel learned that it had been put in writing, he went to his house, in whose upper chamber he had had windows made facing Jerusalem, and 3 times a day, Shacharit, Mincha, Mariv, the morning, afternoon, and evening prayers, he knelt down, prayed, and made confession to his God, as he had always done. So there's a new decree. Does it change him? No. But this was what they were counting on. And those men came thronging in. They were waiting for the appointed time, and they kind of busted him. They came in and found Daniel petitioning his God in supplication. So they were gleeful, they were happy, they couldn't believe it, their plan was working, and they run to the king and they reminded him of the royal ban. "Did you not put in writing that whoever addresses a petition to any god or man besides you, O king, during the next 30 days shall be thrown into a lion's den?" King's hands are tied. He said, "The order stands firm as a law of the Medes and the Persians, cannot be abrogated." So then they clapped their hands and said to the king, "Daniel, one of the exiles of Judah," remember, from the Babylonian exile, from the destruction of the first temple, "he pays no heed to you, O king, or to the ban that you put in writing. 3 times a day he offers his petition." Yes, it just says to God. And this is all in Aramaic. Upon hearing this, the king was very disturbed. He set his heart upon saving Daniel, and until the sun set, made every effort to rescue him. So here's the king, bound by his own words, not wanting the result because he loves, honors, and cares about Daniel, and wants Daniel to survive. So the men came again to the king and said, "It is a law that any ban that the king issues is unalterable." So Daniel was then brought and thrown into the lion's den. What does the king say? "Your God, whom you serve so regularly, will deliver you." And so there's this hope that he will survive. And it's almost like foreshadowing. The king wants Daniel to survive. We know Daniel has faith, but the tension in the story is such that he's being thrown in, looks like certain death. Not only that, but a rock was brought and placed over the mouth of the den. The king sealed it with his signet, so nobody could cheat and open it up, right? And with the signal of his nobles, so that nothing might be altered concerning Daniel. What happens to the king? He fasted. And he didn't have any dancing girls or any diversions at all, and he couldn't sleep. So we know how troubled he is. At the first light of dawn, the king arose. The first thing he did was he rushed to the lion's den. He approached the den and he cried to Daniel in a mournful voice, "Daniel, servant of the living God, Was the God whom you served so regularly able to deliver you from the lions? And Daniel calls out, O king, live forever. He doesn't even say, I'm okay. He offers to the king that he should live forever. My God sent his angel who shut the mouths of the lions so that they did not injure me. So we've got Daniel who has been thrown into the lion's den. The king is praying for him, hoping that he'll survive. And this is the explanation that Daniel offers. My God sent his angel who shut the mouths of the lions so that they did not injure me, inasmuch as I was found innocent by him. Like he was judged by the real judge, the real person who decides his fate. Nor have I, O king, done you any injury. He's protesting his innocence. The king was very glad and ordered Daniel to be brought up out of the den. Daniel was brought up out of the den. No injury was found on him, for he had trusted in his God. Not even his clothes were scratched, nothing. And then, this is sort of like in the Purim story where Haman gets hung on the gallows where he had prepared that for Mordecai. Those men who had slandered Daniel were brought, and together with their children and wives, that part really bothers me, were thrown into the lion's den. They had hardly reached the bottom of the den, not even a minute, when the lions overpowered them and crushed all their bones. So we were returning to nature here. The lions did what lions do, but not with Daniel. Then King Darius wrote to all peoples and nations of every language that inhabit the earth, may your well-being abound. I have given an order that throughout my royal domain, men must tremble in fear of the God of Daniel, for he is the living God who endures forever. His kingdom is indestructible. His dominion is to the end of time. He delivers and saves and performs signs and wonders in heaven and on earth, for he delivered Daniel from the power of the lions. So we're going to take a look now at there's one more line. Then Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and during the reign of Cyrus the Persian. We're getting one king after another. Now, we're going to watch an illustration that is for children. And for some reason, they didn't do their homework and they called it Darius instead of Darius. But other than that, it's really pretty cute.
Stories of the Bible. Daniel in the lion's den. This is Daniel,
Oh, hey!
who was a Jewish man who was taken to Babylon when he was very young.
Yeah.
Daniel loved God and followed God's rules. He talked to God 3 times a day and asked God for help often. Daniel served in the Babylonian king's court for many years
Yeah, I know him.
and under many kings.
Hey, Daniel.
Daniel always proved himself to be more capable than all the other court officials.
My hero, thanks. Well, anytime.
Daniel was serving under King Darius, and because of his great abilities, the king made plans to place him in charge of the entire empire.
Wow, okay.
The other court officials searched for some fault in Daniel, but they couldn't find anything wrong with him. He was faithful, responsible, and completely trustworthy.
Wait.
The court officials realized the only way to get at Daniel would be to challenge his faith.
Come on.
So they went to King Darius
Excuse me, Your Majesty.
and advised him to make a law that for the next 30 days, any person who prays to anyone except King Darius will be thrown into the lion's den.
I like it.
King Darius signed this law, and once a Babylonian king signed a law, it could not be overruled. When Daniel learned of this law, he went home and knelt down, as he always did, to pray in his room with the windows open towards Jerusalem. He prayed 3 times a day, just as he always had done, giving thanks to God and asking for his help. The officials went to Daniel's house and found him praying.
Gotcha.
They went to the king and reminded him of the law.
I remember.
Well,
Then they said that Daniel had been found praying to God 3 times a day.
What?
When the king heard this, He was very upset,
Get over here.
and he spent the whole day trying to think of a way to save Daniel.
Wait, what?
By that evening, the court officials came back to the king and reminded him that no law signed by the Babylonian king could be overruled. So at last, the king gave orders for Daniel to be thrown into the lion's den. The king said to him, "May your God, who you serve faithfully, rescue you." Then the lion's den was sealed shut with Daniel inside. The king spent the night fasting and couldn't sleep. Then very early in the morning, the king hurried to the lion's den. He called out,
Hey, Daniel.
"Was your God able to rescue you from the lions?" And Daniel answered, "Long live the king! My God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths so that they would not hurt me, for I have been found innocent in his sight." The king was overjoyed and ordered that Daniel be taken out of the lion's den. Then the king ordered the men who had schemed against Daniel to be thrown into the lion's den as punishment. Daniel was safe. There was not a scratch on him, for he trusted in God.
Sweet. Isn't that sweet? I like the little, the little comments. But you get the essence of it, that they're trying to teach about faith in God, and they make the lions look like little pussycats. We're going to now take a look at how illustrators and painters, artists throughout the time of art history have portrayed Daniel in the lion's den. I just picked three. The first one, Jenny, is like an illustration for a Sunday school book. All right, so here you see the lions looking very realistic, and they notice Daniel, who appears to be praying on his knees. He looks almost like a monk, kind of. He's got like robes on, you can see that they're usually ferocious because they're bones, showing that they're regular, normal lions that usually eat flesh, meat. And this is this is like a Sunday school book showing lions in three different angles, but you look at his face and he looks faithful, but a little bit worried. You like the eyebrows up a little bit, like there's a little tension in this picture. So that's Daniel's in the lion's den, just a regular kind of an illustration. Let's look at the next slide. Okay, this is by Rubens. This is a Renaissance painter, 17th century, and he decided to show Daniel as if he's a young man, although this is already like the third king that he's serving under, so he would have been probably 70 or 80 years old by then. But he's showing them as a muscular, mostly undressed younger man, and praying. And you can see that the lions are a little ferocious. One of them's got their mouth open, and they seem to be stalking. Do you see how they're different directions? Left, center, right, back. There's like a whole circle that makes your eye go left, down, right, and back to him. And even though here they showed it as if you could see the sky, we know that there was a stone over it. So that the painter decided to make some connection between Daniel praying and some kind of heavenly access. Do you see that? That you can see shrubs, and doesn't look like there's a stone there. It looks like it's sky. So that, and again, the tension is palpable, but you see the light on him is such that he feels like it's like he's in the light of God. He's favored, and there's, how could there be such a light on him when the whole cave is dark? Very interesting choice of the light. Next slide. Now this one's really interesting. This is Breton Rivière, and this is a late 19th century work. Here you have an older Daniel, and he is ignoring the lions who are circling, but there's like a space. Do you see that behind him? And again, there's this special light coming from above, and he is almost basking like an old man in the sun, kind of. His head is upturned, his hands are behind his back. It's a very interesting pose. He's looking up as if he's in thought and in prayer and enjoying that light. Some light is coming through, and the lions almost are behind a force shield. It's almost like there's magnetism or something keeping them away. There's a complete circle around him that the lions dare not enter. That was a very interesting decision on the part of Rivière as well. All right, so we'll stop the slides. And I'd love your reaction to the verses, to the animation, and to the paintings, the scene. Perhaps you saw it completely different. So paint us a picture of how you saw this scene. Yes, Linda Waddell.
Well, the first two paintings, I don't know what it was, but it was screaming at me. They weren't painted by people who knew anything about Judaism. There was just something about it. The third one seemed to be a little bit less, I can't really explain it, but just less, more in line with what we might think of as looking at Daniel and the lions.
That's interesting, because most painters until the modern era were not Jewish because of the second commandment, and so it's only really from the Impressionists up that we have actual art for art's sake, and not just for ritual art. So that's a very interesting idea, and we're going to see more next week and the week after that about commentary that is not a Jewish line of thinking from the verses, but actually shows how this was how it influenced other religions. Any other comments on what we read or saw? Yes, Anita.
First, I love that little animation. And when it's just threw them into the, and that was just so funny. But my vision is that Daniel just totally trusts in God. And he's very calm because he's just so highly spiritual. And the lions just kind of like Dr. Dolittle, that Daniel is able to calm the lions, and that they're just kind of like pussycats in the little animation, that they just, had this sense of God's spirit around him.
That's really interesting, because I know in our meditation class and also in my Musar group, those that have cats, the minute we start meditating, the cats come, sit, and start to purr.
Yeah. So I had that, and then I just quickly did the math, and you're right, he probably was in his 70s around this time.
Could be. Thank you. Linda Patent.
Yeah, that was my impression as well, that he was in a deep meditative state, and that the light was emanating from within and without. And so there was a meeting of the light.
The
Energy
right.
of meditation.
And the three who went in were full of fear, and animals could smell that fear and knew that they were prey and not another creature of God. Interesting. Any other reactions? Yes, Julie.
I just had never envisioned more than 2 or 3 lions. So when I saw the whole group of them, it was very frightening to see these large, hungry creatures. So anyway, that was just a new view. I guess I had thought of it, well, it gets out of there, so it couldn't have been so bad, but not so.
No, there was a lot of tension in those paintings. You really felt any minute they would strike, and yet you felt this distance, almost like as if he had a magic wand and he went, be gone or something. But I like the idea that it was a meditative state that they caught on. That was beautiful. Any other comments? All right, so yes, Terry, hesitantly, but yes. Wait, let me unmute you. Hold on, I can do this.
If we look at the Daniel story as a story that's conveying a truth and not necessarily a reality, on that level, it makes perfect sense, because so often our fear of both the unknown and our fear of being alone, not with God, not with creation, but alone, causes us dramatic harm, whether it be from a lion or just psychologically or some other physical deal. If we can attach ourselves, as the story tells us in a sense, to creation, to God, to the circle of life, if you go to the Lion King, we can be much calmer. And in reality, sometimes in those situations, you can have an impact on the creatures around you. So I find that story probably to be a story as opposed to a true reality, and certainly not one that would repeat itself every single time for a person of faith. But it conveys a very important message to me, anyway, about the power of being connected to reality.
So I want everyone here to remember what Terry said about it being truth, but not reality. That was a brilliant phrase. I wish I had come up with that. That's great. So the idea is there's an essence here that rings true, and whether it's a real story or not, or historical or not, or possible or not, never mind. Nancy's raising her hand. Okay, let's hear Nancy.
Yeah, I was going to say that my thought is not as deep as Terry's, which I really do think the separation between. But what I was going to say is someone who is slowly overcoming my fear of big dogs. People would always say, "Don't act like you're afraid because the dog can smell that." Well, if you're afraid, how do you act like how do you make your smell different that you're not afraid if you're really afraid? So I'm just saying that to people who love dogs. People who are afraid of dogs don't act afraid.
Calm your breath. Yes, Anita?
Yeah, and with what Terry said, for the past couple of years now on Zoom, I've been doing all these classes on Torah and Talmud and all this stuff. And so I've come to exactly that conclusion that some things, if you really read about the Babylonian Talmud, more so than Palestinian, but it's that they put things together. They kind of took things that may or may not have been actual fact, but they wanted to teach something. So what's important is the lesson. And so there might be some amount of reality in there, but mostly they've written it to be a teaching.
Right, and that would explain why after the first interpretation of the first dream, in the next chapter, suddenly the king again makes a golden statue and says, "Bow down." Didn't he just come up with the idea that God is the true God, and why would he do that? It makes no sense. And Julie, you're so funny. So the first 6 chapters that we've read are in the third person. Daniel did this and this happened to Daniel. It's third person. It's about him, stories about Daniel, or it's a conglomeration of various stories put under the title of Daniel. Now from 7 to 12, we have a whole different thing. It's first person. Daniel's telling about his own dreams, his own interpretations, his own prophecies, his own idea of revelation and the end of days and beasts that he saw. So we're going to dive in now to Daniel 7, and I'm going to share that screen, and we'll get as far as we get, and we'll really dive into the meaning of it probably next week. And we still have 2 more weeks to finish through chapter 12. All right, let's see. Anita, would you begin to read, please?
In the first year of the king Belshazzar of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and a vision in his mind in bed. Afterward, he wrote down the dream, beginning the account. Daniel related the following. In my vision at night, I saw the 4 winds of heaven stirring up the great sea. 4 mighty beasts, different from each other, emerged from the sea. The first was like a lion, but had eagle's wings. As I looked on, its wings were plucked off. Then it was lifted off the ground and set on its feet like a man and given the mind of a man. Then I saw a second different beast, which was like a bear, but raised on one side, and with 3 fangs in its mouth among its teeth. It was told, "Arise, eat much meat." After that, as I looked on, there was another one like a leopard, and it had on its back 4 wings like those of a bird. The beast had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. After that, as I looked on in the night vision, there was a 4th beast, fearsome, dreadful, and very powerful, with great iron teeth that devoured and crushed and stamped the remains with its feet. It was different from all the other beasts which had gone before it. It had 10 horns. While I was gazing upon these horns, a new little horn sprouted up among them. 3 of the older horns were uprooted to make room for it. There were eyes in this horn like those of a man, and a mouth that spoke arrogantly. As I looked on, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His garment was like white snow, and the hair of his head was like lamb's wool. His throne was tongues of flame. Its wheels were blazing fire. A river of fire streamed forth before him. Thousands upon thousands served him. Myriads upon myriads attended him. The court sat, and the books were opened. I looked on. Then, because of the arrogant words that the horn spoke, the beast was killed as I looked on. Its body was destroyed, and it was consigned to the flames. The dominion of the other beasts was taken away, but an extension of life was given to them for a time and season. As I looked on in the night vision, one like a human being came with the clouds of heaven. He reached the Ancient of Days and was presented to him. Dominion, glory, and kingship were given to him. All peoples and nations of every language must serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that shall not pass away, and his kingship one that shall not be destroyed. As for me, Daniel, my spirit was disturbed within me, and the vision of my mind alarmed me. I approached one of the attendants and asked him the true meaning of all this. He gave me this interpretation of the matter. These great beasts, 4 in number, mean 4 kingdoms will rise out of the earth. Then holy ones of the Most High will receive the kingdom and will possess the kingdom forever, forever and ever. Then I wanted to ascertain the true meaning of the 4th beast, which was different from them all, very fearsome, with teeth of iron, claws of bronze that devoured and crushed and stamped the remains, and of the 10 horns on its head, and of the new one that sprouted to make room for which 3 fell, the horn that had eyes and a mouth that spoke arrogantly, and which was more conspicuous than its fellows. I looked on as that horn made war within the holy ones and overcame them until the Ancient of Days came and judgment was rendered in favor of the holy ones of the Most High. For the time had come and the holy ones took possession of the kingdom. This is what he said. The 4th beast means there will be a 4th kingdom upon the earth, which will be different from all the kingdoms. It will devour the whole earth, tread it down, and crush it. And the 10 horns mean from that kingdom, 10 kings will arise, and after them, another will arise. He will be different from the former ones and will bring low 3 kings. He will speak words against the Most High and will harass the holy ones of the Most High. He will think of changing times and laws, and they will be delivered into his power for a times and a half time. Then the court will sit and his dominion will be taken away, to be destroyed and abolished for all time. The kingship and dominion and grandeur belonging to all the kingdoms under heaven will be given to the people of the holy ones of the Most High. Their kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey them. Here the account ends. I, Daniel, was very alarmed by my thoughts, and my face darkened, and I could not put the matter out of my mind.
Beautiful reading. Thank you. So all of chapter 7 is Daniel having a vision, and it reminds us very much of that first dream that the king had in the very beginning, where Daniel said it's 4 different dominions and empires. Were you able to get that, what I sent you, Jenny? in the last hour? So there are these different beasts, and this one was just a woodcut with the winds. Look at the winds being blown here, and the strange heads and the strange horns and bird-like and hoofs and bear-like, and just such strange look. This is a real kind of apocalyptic vision of very dangerous, unearthly animals. It could be, I don't know. I didn't see the attribution. It looks sort of like Dürer, but it was very expressionistic like that, very sort of sketchy and yet very scary. So some of them are more literal, like, lion with wings, a bear, leopard, many, many horned kind of an animal. And they're showing different, at the top, it was showing different, like Egyptian and Greek, and ending with Romans and Persian and Romans. So they're showing different architectural styles to show that there would be different rulers. Next one. I thought this was interesting because they wanted to show different governments. And so they put them on the world map to say there would be different empires emanating from different parts of the world. Which ones they were, quite interesting. They came up with various different explanations. Look at the next one. Now, this is the one that I find very, very interesting. And there's a lion with the wings. The Persian Empire, that's where you get Darius and the Medes. Then you get the Grecian Empire moving into the Roman Empire. But since this is, I got this from a regular secular source, it indicates that what they see, the everlasting kingdom, they're talking about Jesus. And so we're going to look at that next week about some of the writings that show about the revelations and the end of the world as we know it, and how that was interpreted, especially in the book of Daniel, in the Christian religion. And I've given Julie that task so that we know how our brothers and sisters are interpreting this. We should not have blinders on and say that only our interpretation exists. We can say this is the one we choose, but we should know that others exist. Do you want to say a few words in introduction about that, Julie?
Well, I think that Revelation and Daniel they're both part of this end times movement, and that lasted for about 400 years. And it was when things were getting really bad in the Israel, Palestine area. And I think it's a response to, fear. All these horrible things are happening, and they had these dreadful, countries come, emperors come and destroy them. And the Roman emperor and the Romans, which have gone from being republic, sort of, a Roman republic, becomes a Roman empire with a dictator. And so they're very, very connected. And this was a way of trying to create something that seemed solid, and that in the midst of all these awful, awful things, there was hope. So that's kind of
as scary as all of these were. Yeah. The message was, no matter how powerful a ruler or how extensive an empire, it will crumble, it will fall, and another one even more powerful will come, and that too will crumble and fall. And in the end, there'll be something, as you said, hopeful, that will be in the end of days. It will be a kind of kingdom of God that where the reign will be gentle and compassionate and life affirming. And so sometimes facing the nightmare, facing the beasts, facing the demons is one way to find solace and to come to some hopeful conclusion. I don't know about you, but there were monsters and spiders under my bed when I was a little girl. And I would call my mommy and I would say, there's spiders and there are monsters under the bed. And she, being very logical, opened the light, threw off the covers and said, see, no monsters. And I just said, well, obviously they go away when you come in. You know, I needed some way to hold on to,
Yes.
you know, and it was scary. It was scary.
Yeah.
I would open up the covers because then I was vulnerable. And the last minute when I knew the spiders and the monsters were going to come, I quickly cover, and I got them. They never got me. But we all have to fight the demons and the monsters that are hiding under the bed. And these days they're also bombing human beings, and
Yes.
we have to find a way to help and to overcome these demons and empires and rulers who, in the end, even though they start off with high ideals, it ends up being violent. So this is what happened then, and in some kind of a way it's happening now. And I just really wanted to spend some time on this, this idea of the great literature of the end of days. We don't pay much attention to that because we say, what's the here and now? What's the mitzvot we can do right now? I just helped somebody who was in a difficult situation, and I got them in touch with someone who could really help them, and so that they could have phone and internet and gas and, you know, other bills and stuff. We have to reach out wherever we can and keep those demons away, but the demons will come back. And they may look crazy. I mean, they combine all those animal parts, all the most ferocious parts, the horns, the claws, the power of wings, of flight, the teeth. I mean, and the artists really go to town, making them even more ferocious than any actual animal in the jungle would be. So I'm finding this book of Daniel just fascinating. And remember that we've got two Daniels. The beginning is the whole story that we looked at, where he's interpreting for several kings their dreams, where he's thrown into the lion's den, where there's the whole thing with the statue that talks about four different rulers. And then this second part is all the visions. So we're going to be spending now 2 weeks on what are the visions of Daniel. How are they like Ezekiel, you know, with the wheels and the beasts, and everything rings to me like, oh, that sounds like another part. As well it should, because these are stories that were handed down, spoken orally, and were put together sometimes, as Anita said, because it's convenient to tell a story and to teach a lesson at this moment in this particular book. So I'm just finding this fascinating. Any reactions or you know, comments or questions? I see Linda's hand is up. Is it still up or up again? Linda Patent.
It's up again. Thank you. You know, Rabbi, this brings me back to the last studies when I asked you about dreams and imagination versus the reality of every day. And so we try to balance that out, but I really feel that the reason these monsters are so exaggerated and all of these visions are so exaggerated is, again, to bring to us perhaps the demons of things that are anti-God. In other words, power, personal power, greed, the morose behavior that we're witnessing now with Putin. I mean, it's beyond comprehension in 2022. And the actions he's taking are almost like everybody's demons. They're just the same as our greatest fears of what could possibly happen. So I think it's a recurring theme throughout the Bible. And I think that what we might want to, or what I want to consider focusing on, is my shortcomings, the demons within me, the things that I contribute personally to the community that are bad, as well as negative, as well as good. And I think that serves as a lesson to think about, especially as we come to Passover.
Beautiful, thank you. Because we're all a bit blind and we all could see more clearly. And we all literally have blind spots. And so we sometimes need a mirror, and sometimes that mirror has to be very stark with demons where we go, well, I would never do that. And then you look and say, in what way am I in a lion's den? You know, Anita, I saw your hand.
Well, first it was like, no, I don't want that mirror, but but I did the first of the pictures of the beasts, the one that Jenny had originally. I noticed it made me think of this week's Parsha Shmini, because the animal, the beast on the right-hand side had cloven hooves. And see the beast on the right with, of course, it's kind of Satan looking, but it's also, since Shmini, we're talking about kashrut and we're
Right.
talking about the animals. And I saw the cloven hooves, and there's that issue about the pig that puts on this facade of being kosher because it has the cloven hooves, but inside it's not kosher because it doesn't chew its cud. And so, I mean, you look at this beast, and it's obviously, it's very scary, and it's not like it's telling us anything pleasant, but nonetheless, it has the cloven hooves that just made me make that connection.
Yeah, that good. I noticed that too, about the cloven hoof. So this week we should pay attention to our nightmares and our like worst image of what could hurt, what could harm, what could gore, what could devour, and then see what in us can remain calm and connected, or as Terry said, you know, like basking in the light of that connection with God, to calm the beast. And the beast will be different for each one of us. So we have to be the artists of our own realm and see what it is we conjure up and how do we come to some solution. So next week, we're going to be looking more at his visions, and it's very hard to hold on to them. That's why I wanted to show illustrations. How many horns, and then what happened, and what about the teeth? I mean, there's so many details. You'd have to reread it, which is why it's good to see how they were illustrated, because then you can put it all together. I know I read it 3 or 4 times and I still couldn't picture it. So we'll go on with the vision, and we're going to see rams westward, northward, southward. We're going to see movements. We're going to see rivers. We're going to see just a fortress of Shushan, actually, which brings us to Persia. I keep seeing connections with the Book of Esther. And so I wish you all a very interesting week. We're still in Adar, but Purim is past. It's like in tatters. You know, after a parade, how they have to clean up the road with all the leftovers of the confetti and everything. That's where we are right now. We've taken off our masks, but they're still maybe not put away. My costumes are still here on the bed. I haven't put them away yet. There's this sense of we just come out of this amazing spiel time, this time of talking about the courage of Esther and the craziness of the king and the horror of Haman. And yet we're not at Passover yet, but we're in that in-between time. And we're contemplating, because we live by the calendar, you know, we're always coming off of a holiday or coming into a holiday. We're kind of sobering up a bit, literally. And we're coming into a time of saying, oh, very soon we're going to be contemplating coming out of slavery and going into freedom. Well, what does that freedom mean? I always find this a very interesting time between Purim and Passover. So this is where we're hovering right now. And I'll have a Birkat HaChodesh, blessing the new moon, this Friday. So you know that Nisan is coming very soon. And every time there's a new moon, for next Shabbat, actually is next Shabbat, not this one, is a new moon, that we're getting to a time of possibilities and openings. And this is an opportunity to say what's on your heart and what you really want to begin. It's an auspicious time. So I just really wanted to have this time together and open up the box and see what pops out. Awesome. So I thank you. Have a good week and early Shabbat Shalom.